Claire, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
How was the trip down?
It was raining, so it just started raining as I pulled into Manchester Piccadilly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got the train so that I could do some emails, etc. So yeah, perfectly fine. Trains all
Lovely.
worked well.
Well, I wish, it's the typical Manchester.
Yeah, welcome to Manchester.
Welcome with the rain. But look, I guess to get into it, I tend to ask everyone that comes on the show, at what point in your career did you know that you were going to be a major business leader, and also where were you at in life at the time?
I'd imagine that this is not going to be a unique answer. I don't think there was a specific point. Mm-hmm. It was a gradual realization. I have what you could call a slightly squiggly career before I got into before I got into 3PL. I had, in my first 3PL that I worked at, I had some really big success in the early eCommerce days.
Wow, okay.
So starting from 2007, after the dot-com bubble had resolved itself largely, and that was when all the retailers really started to find success online. And that's really when e-commerce logistics, e-fulfillment first got going. And I was lucky to be recruited by a company who was a bit of an old school logistics company, but they very quickly recognised they had the right systems from actually automotive, but not the right people to go and talk to retailers, in particular fashion retailers. Mm-hmm. So they were looking for somebody, and at the same time I was looking to use my fashion retail experience and do something different. So it started off being a bit of an experiment between me and my then boss. But yeah, it worked out really well. So I kind of thought then that this is the place to be and that I can do well here. So I was...
Got you.
But a gradual realisation.
And I guess where were you at? Did you go into a sales role? Is that how you got into it?
Yes.
Okay.
So I had previously, when I worked in Manchester, I worked in an importer of mostly footwear and women's clothing called Danielle in Wythenshawe, lovely Wythenshawe. And I went to, they acquired the company I previously worked for, and I went to sell handbags, because I'd previously been a handbag buyer at an accessories buyer at Arcadia Group and then Oasis. Yeah. And so I actually lost the train of thought there. Sorry.
No, it's all right.
What was the question again?
What role did you go into?
Yes. So I was developing product and handbags, but also selling them to high street multiples and supermarkets. So it was a sales and product role, which then translated into a business development role in Amethyst Group, as it was then. And then, just moved up. So every role I've had, so getting more and more commercial and strategic, but always with a large element of outward-facing, market-facing growth, P&L and new business and looking after existing customers. So sales and account management.
Okay, bro. And was Amethyst Group, was that the first company that you started managing people?
No, I first managed people when I was the deputy manager of a branch of the Body Shop just behind Liberty, and so kind of Carnaby Street. So I was, I had a team of up to 30 people when I was in my very, so not long after I graduated. Yeah. And I was a makeup artist as well.
Love that.
It was great. So it's great working in central London, having the buzz of a very gifty environment, and obviously a lot of beauty products. So I still do a lot of beauty now. So I had a team there. And then I didn't really manage people again until about 10 years ago. So I had maybe one or two reports here and there.
Yes.
A designer here, an administrator there, but then not a big team like that again until 10 years ago.
Got you. And I guess 10 years ago, where were you at in life? What was going on?
So 10 years ago, the first 3PL Amethyst that I mentioned went through an acquisition. So they had been owned, when I worked for them, by the Tochu Corporation of Japan. Okay. It's a really big trading house. I loved it because working for the Japanese is really nice. They're very sort of paternal, very sort of, a very nice, pleasant place to work, although it can be quite slow. But also they owned or had significant shareholdings in lots of really exciting brands like Vivienne Westwood and Paul Smith. And,
very cool.
So there was lots of crossover. So they decided to sell Amethyst, and they the new shareholders who had a slightly different direction. We're bringing them into a group that had a slightly different feel. Nothing wrong with it. Probably a sign of success for them.
Yes.
But I'd been there 8 years at the time, so I decided that was a good time to start looking around the market. And Amethyst was despite being owned by Japanese, it was a very British company. So all of the sites were in the UK. And I had an opportunity within my network of relationships to go and work for an international company, a company with warehouses all around the world, but German, so a company called Avato. So I moved over to work in Western Germany, but selling global services, but with a real leaning towards the UK, because obviously UK have always been leaders, I would argue global leaders. People in China and America might disagree, in e-commerce in particular. So multi-channel are still focusing on fashion, beauty, consumer products.
Yeah.
So went to Germany for 2 years and had a really good time there.
Brilliant.
So 10 years was a big change.
Yeah. And Avato, are they healthcare?
So Avato is a large group, a bit like Itochu's. Itochu's is very much about trading, but Avato, they actually started off as a bookseller.
Right.
So about 150 years ago, I believe the founder had a printing press and started printing Bibles. But they now own Penguin Random House.
Okay.
They also own RTL, which is like the German ITV, but bigger. And they have they do a lot in kind of outsourced services generally, so financial services, healthcare, customer services. And I worked in the supply chain division, which actually was originally an internal service for all its own group companies, but they realised that they did it quite well.
Yeah.
And therefore they made it into a product that they could sell externally as well. So I was in the supply chain of Avato, but so people come across Avato in all sorts of different ways. I get letters from Avato about my car lease.
Yeah, they're a hard one to put your finger on as to like exactly what they do or what they're known for.
Yes.
But, no, interesting. And then where did you move from Avato?
So after Brexit, working for a German company, they had a bit of a wobble about where they saw the supply chain in the UK going. That's recovered subsequently, but at the time they asked me to move away from warehousing into tech sales. Okay. Which would have been okay, but it wasn't where my heart was and where my passion was. I definitely like working in a warehouse. So I started looking around again, and a few of my former colleagues from Amethyst had actually gone to Seco. Right. So I joined them, jointly running the UK 3PL side, so the fulfillment side, but again, fitting into a global network. So Seco is an American private equity company. Yes. So we were able to put together solutions which would be all of the inbound freight forwarding, warehousing in Asia, Europe, UK, USA, and then all of the outbound and returns processing. So a nice end-to-end solution.
Well, fine. Okay.
Yeah, it was really good.
And then, and now, of course.
Yes. So I moved to Uniserve in June. Yeah. So a very different ownership structure, but in some ways similar to Seco in terms of the products that we offer. Only there's a broader range now, which was what attracted me. So so I'm now working for Uniserve, which is a privately owned British company, really big one, so 1.4 billion. So it's actually the biggest independent logistics company. And they actually own a group of 20 companies, and then they have interest in another, I'm going to say 60 or 70 companies across the whole supply chain. So not just end to end, but also including consultancies in packaging and compliance and sustainability, and tech and just literally everything that you can think of in the supply chain. And I actually, although I'm British and working for a British company, I actually work for Uniserve Netherlands. So I'm working in the EU. Yes. So helping to grow the whole end-to-end solution with getting better with new customers and existing customers, but also growing geographically in the medium term across Europe. So
amazing, exciting.
It's really exciting.
And how many countries are they currently in for Europe?
So in terms of warehousing, we only have our own branded Uniserve warehousing in the Netherlands at the moment.
Right, okay.
So watch this space though, because very soon we'll be able to say that about 2 other countries.
Right.
So, yeah.
Are you allowed to say?
No. But it will be quite soon, so
Yeah.
I'll be sure to tell you straight away.
Bro. And is it like an asset light or heavy?
No, so that's another big difference. So Seco had that asset light model, which obviously can give you some agility, but it also means you have arguably, you have less control and you have less weight when pendulums swing to extremes in the market. Uniserv has a very asset-heavy approach. So our owner likes to literally own everything. So one of those companies is a property company. So he likes to own the buildings that he operates in.
Yes.
He likes to, even in some of our warehouses, we don't lease any of the mechanical handling equipment. It's all.
Oh, really?
It really is that strict. And so he owns shipping lines and all sorts. So
right.
That's one thing that really attracted me. So the difference between working for a private equity company where they're
all shareholder focused.
Exactly, and and again, it's not a failure. It's a way to be successful, but it does mean that some of the decisions are necessarily focused on the immediate or very short-term impact on the bottom line.
Got you.
Whereas with Uniserv, we can look at more medium and long-range decision making, which means that we can offer a stability and take a long-term view, which is very attractive, especially in terms of quality of service and stability of service provision.
Yeah, and no doubt working there as well. Probably just feels quite nice.
There is that. I think there's definitely a bit of a culture of once you're in and you're happy, there's a lot of really, really long servers there. Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. And I guess you said about decision making, sort of venture capital versus, sort of privately owned. Could you give us an example of like some of the decisions maybe you were talking about like VC would make just purely to serve shareholders versus?
I would be nervous about giving anything specific from my experience because of confidentiality issues. But I guess it's things like with any private equity company, the return on investment has to be so quick that the business case can only look at 1, 2 or 3 years ahead, or it requires a client or somebody to lock in with you for the time. So any investments have to be really, the justification has to be so tight and locked in, which is quite difficult to get that kind of commitment, especially in these kind of uncertain times from any client. So I don't know, let's say invest in a large new warehouse, for example. Back in the day, or with a more stable customer, you might build a warehouse speculatively. So a large or a medium logistics company might build a warehouse knowing that there was capacity needed in the market and speculate on that and then go and sell it as it was being built or even after it was built. But with private equity, they just can't. They really can't take that kind of shortish, that long-term view. So they have to know that they can guarantee that investment will pay off in 1, 2 or 3 years' time, or have a 5-year or a 10-year contract from a really large retailer, which is quite a frightening large commitment for anybody to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas obviously when you're keen to own properties and assets and you see a property as an investment almost as a standalone, then you can take those 5 or 10-year decisions knowing that it will one day pay off for you, and you don't need to answer to, well, you've got one shareholder, so he's making this decision. So
And I guess to understand global footprint, how many sites does Uniserv have globally? Just to understand the footprint.
So in warehousing only, so in 3PL, we've got about 1 million square foot in the UK.
Wow.
And growing, so also going to be making an announcement on the UK soon. And then in the rest of the world, it's probably similar.
Yeah.
So about 50-50, but slightly more the UK.
It's interesting. I feel like I get everyone on here right before they're about to make announcements.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I think Dwayne was on, and the DHL eCom everything was all happening. And that got announced 2 weeks after. So, yeah.
Dwayne's really good for announcements.
Yeah.
I think the parcel industry generally make their announcements after peak in January, don't they?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's budget season at the minute,
Yes,
so everyone's behind the scenes breaking the deals and stuff like that. So, no, interesting. And I guess across that career, you know, over the last 10 years, like, where would you say, like, highs, lows, any challenges, you know, just to sort of shine a light on stuff?
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, in logistics in the last 6 years, there have been so many highs and lows, haven't there? So if I go back to like the before times, I would call it, I can remember negotiating contracts where you knew that the CPI or the RPI would only be going up an average of 2% a year, and you could lock in prices for 3 years. And because you know that even though there would be an increase in costs, you could, in that time, comfortably gain efficiency to be able to offset it. And now you couldn't do that.
Right.
So we've had obviously huge change in the minimum wage.
Yes.
Which overall is a worthy ambition of the governments, of both flavours, to be trying to get everybody to be at living wage standard. But then COVID really threw that out. So it meant that 1 year that the predicted living wage was rather than 5 or 6% was only 3%. But then the following year it was 10%. So 10%, right. And when most of your cost, 70% on average of warehousing cost is in labour. 10% of your cost increase goes up is a huge impact. So our contracts now have a very different flavour in order to protect your cost base, because it's a low margin industry because it's quite mature. So labour costs going up, and then we've also had COVID, which was a huge impact on the supply chain. So first off, it was very difficult to manage because in that first phase, you had a lot of anxiety, and obviously you can't do warehousing from home. So most people had to come into the warehouses to pick and pack, and of course e-commerce volumes went through the ceiling for a lot of categories. But then we had some categories, like particularly the kind of clients that might be selling travel accessories or things that you would use in the office, as in to wear to the office, went through the floor. And then social distancing meant space occupation went out the window. So I'm doing ceilings, floor, windows. And the anxiety was really hard to manage there. And there was lots of grace and goodwill, perhaps in the first month or two, but that wore thin quite quickly. So then we had a lot of anxiety and stress, not only from the team and the colleagues, but also from our client base. Obviously they're struggling as well.
And which company were you at during COVID?
That was Seco.
It was Seco, wasn't it?
So I was at Seco for 8 years. So that was tricky. And then subsequently we had, obviously, everybody was overstocked and they couldn't get stock in, so there was too much stock and then there wasn't enough stock, and then the supply chain pendulum swung so that freight forwarding went up by tenfold in terms of pricing. So the disruption went through the supply chain kind of like a wrecking ball, swinging one way then the other for a couple of years. We had a big labour crisis in 21, which was really directly attributable to COVID. And at the beginning of 21, the anxiety of COVID had gone from the team, but then everyone started getting COVID. So then we actually had all the absences, and so it was that really took a couple of years to stabilise actually. So first a space crisis, then a labour crisis, and then just as that was all kind of settling down, Brexit kind of came with another wrecking ball. So they would be the both the highs and the lows, because with all of those difficult times, those interesting times and challenging times, you learn so much. And I think whenever you look back on a challenging time in your life of anything, the times that you find most difficult are the times where you grow the most and you learn the most. So and also the time when the teams pulled together and got closer the most. So that kind of spirit of having the blitz spirit, I suppose. So that was definitely interesting.
Definitely interesting. Yeah. Okay. And what about, say, highlights? What would you say are the big, for you to say?
So I think we did a really interesting thing at Seco in terms of turning the fulfillment side around. So Seco historically was famously a freight forwarding company.
Yes.
And then, like a lot of freight forwarding companies, they decided to do a bit of warehousing on the side. But Seco were a little bit more forward thinking. So they actually decided to go into e-commerce not long after that big e-commerce that I talked about earlier started in sort of late 2008, 9, 10 by that time. So they actually developed their own warehouse management systems, which were e-commerce first.
Right, okay.
But what they had was good space. They leased some quality facilities and great in-house developed systems with that vision to go into e-commerce and multi-channel. But the sales team was very freighty. And with freight, obviously, there's, to some degree, and I'm not trying to disrespect any of my colleagues. Yeah, not bashing anyone. But it's a different sales thing. So you can pretty much, within reason, you can put anything on a container and you know what your costs are. So you know that you need to sell it above cost and then you've not lost money. And so your company is okay with you. But with fulfillment, you've got it's so much more complicated. So the size of the product makes a huge difference. The amount of times you touch it makes a huge difference. So your space and labour costs really need to be balanced very carefully. You really need to model the pricing quite carefully to make sure that you're not losing money, because it's low margin. It's very easy to lose money. Yeah. And when the freight people were putting in anything, famously Christmas trees, for example. So really big things that were selling, in this case, in a quite a sort of value end of the market, only there for 6 weeks of the year. So it was impossible to make money from that product. And so they had this beautiful warehouse, beautiful systems, but it was full of the wrong stuff that wasn't really commercially viable. Yeah. And so the turnaround project there was very much not just me on my own. It was started off by a colleague, and then I came in and helped fix the actual client mix. But it was about right sizing who the clients were, how many clients they had, and what those clients sold and what channel they were selling them to. And that business unit turned around to a really healthy, from a very dangerous P&L to a really healthy P&L in a matter of years. So,
are you allowed to give the number?
Yep. Well, I might be, but I don't work for them anymore, so I couldn't check the permissions.
No.
But it was big both ways.
Interesting. And I guess going on to that, because I know the customer, but what would you say Uniserve's ideal customer profile is? If you were to, or do they have one? So,
well, I have one for my bit, and it has some e-commerce at least. So e-commerce. There are very few pure plays left in e-commerce now, I think, because retail's making a comeback. I really believe that. So bricks and mortar's growing, and if you're wanting to get market share as a brand that starts online, then you do need to start looking at doing B2B in some way, whether that's selling to Amazon or marketplaces or putting your stuff into other online, more department stores, for example. So e-commerce is great for being able to touch every product, and obviously that has a cost, but also therefore it has a charge. But we acknowledge that multi-channel is the way that goes. So wholesale, e-commerce, and retail. So that kind of mix. So we're talking consumer facing. Obviously, you need e-commerce in there, and then small is good, because obviously the smaller something is, the higher yield per square metre you can get. So it's about the revenue. Obviously, our biggest fixed cost, labour is our biggest cost, but our biggest fixed cost is space.
Got you.
So to get the yield per square foot, the amount that you can charge per the bit of rent that you're paying, the smaller the product, the better. So that's why beauty supplements, clothing, accessories. I was pointing at my shoes for some reason, but also high tech and those sorts of things. So microphones like this would be perfect. Yeah. So, but what we don't want are Christmas trees. Yeah. Lawnmowers, ideally. Those sort of things that fill up the big electrical. Yeah. So exactly. They're basically the units, I suppose, per square metre. Yeah. The higher the better.
Got you.
For us. So that's what makes warehouses or multi-channel shared user warehouses work. What makes freight forwarding work is much broader. So we'll have specialists in lots of different markets. So they can do Christmas trees.
And then a salesperson in freight and a salesperson in 3PL fulfillment. Yeah. What would you say it takes to be a good salesperson or the difference between the two?
I think
to be a good salesperson.
I think there's probably a few more tiers, if you like, in freight forwarding, funny enough, because I think at entry level, if you're you're coming in as a newbie, quite young, one of your first jobs, you're going to be looking to get as many jobs as you can.
Yeah.
And so that's quite old school.
Yeah.
I think that's about contacting people. It's about obviously marketing and lead gen, but really the ratio of success is much more directly associated with the amount of hard work you put in, whether that's calls or emails. So yeah, it's very activity based, but that's quite transactional.
Yeah.
So then when you're moving up into getting those more big deals, more complicated deals, then it becomes a bit more similar to how I see fulfillment working. So fulfillment is, I really, really believe this, is relationship driven.
Yeah.
So if you're outsourcing your business to a third party logistics company, you are giving them your everything. You're literally putting all of your inventory into one or more of their distribution centres, and therefore to get your inventory to your customers, you have to trust and rely on that company
who's housing
and if they don't do it right, then your business can fall over and it can be completely ruined.
Yeah.
And so that's, not only is that an incredibly important decision, especially if you're a founder or obviously a C-suite, the people that are making those decisions, it's really emotional, and that you really have to know that you can work with the people. So you'll almost always find that the successful deals are done between groups of people who already knew each other, because they have to know, they have to have that relationship and know that they can trust the people they're going to work with. And everything else comes after that. So obviously price is important, IT is important, the facilities, the locations, they're all really important. But if you don't have that initial relationship and know that you can trust the people, then those things won't follow, because you can actually find all of those things with a number of companies.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a big trust exercise.
It is, yeah. And I think if you're putting together those really complicated global freight forwarding deals, which also involve purchase order management or demand planning, multi-mode, multi-region, multi-different products, then that also becomes a trust issue. So those, at the higher level where you're doing millions of pounds worth of deals, then those freight people need to have that same approach. So it's about getting out there, getting to know people.
Interesting.
And helping each other, I think.
Yeah, and this is an ugly question, but has there ever been a time where you've got on like a house on fire, there's a massive, almost, pre-existing relationship with someone, and the relationship's solid and it's gained that trust element, but then operationally in the business that it is, it's almost gone wrong?
Yes and no. So to answer the question specifically, there have been times where the operation has been more difficult than you anticipated.
Yeah.
For various reasons. So perhaps it's because the client side didn't understand their numbers, or they didn't, especially if they're going in-house to outsource.
Yeah.
There's some responsibility on the client side, and it's our job to communicate that. But there is some responsibility to get your processes right, because when you have an in-house, you can kind of do what you want whenever you want, and all these little kind of favours on the side happen, and that anxiety of outsourcing it and that big change can be quite stressful for the company.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of danger there for the relationship if your team and their team aren't working together effectively in managing that change process. But generally, if you've won that business because you've got that relationship, you already have a solid foundation to work through that. I have had almost the opposite, so where I've had a business come to me that I didn't know before, but they came to me through a consultant actually,
right,
where we recognised during the process that perhaps this relationship wasn't perfect, and we wondered whether we should walk away, and we didn't. And with the benefit of hindsight, I think we should have called it and walked away, because it didn't work out. It was difficult and messy for both parties, with responsibility on both sides. So, but yeah, we had. I always said to my team, if you ever, for whatever reason, in whatever process, if you have some kind of alarm bell going off in the back of your head, and your gut feeling is going something, that's actually your experience, short-circuiting your logic and coming up to you through your subconscious and saying, look at this, look at this, look at this. And that happens. And I said, you must never ignore it. You must never ignore it. Sit down, calm down, work out what it is, because there's a reason that gut feeling is giving you that anxiety or that alarm bell. And in this specific case, I ignored my own advice because I think we wanted to, there was a drive to build the business very quickly at the time. And so obviously we went into that kind of, a sale's a sale type of situation. But that's very much against how we had turned that business around. We turned that business around by having the right customers that were the right fit for each other.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting. And did you find, because I feel like in that space, if you do get it wrong, it's almost both parties can lose out.
Exactly.
You could lose your profits and margins, and then naturally they could just have a really bad, drop off of sales, customers and stuff.
Yeah,
So
I mean, that could happen. I think in this particular case, the service was delivered, so the client's customers were always okay. So, but it did mean that we weren't working together effectively, because usually your interests are completely aligned with the clients.
Yeah.
So it's in the 3PL's interest for the client's business to grow, which means that you have to look after their end user experience, and so you're looking after their investment in customer acquisition by delivering on the promises that the brand is making to their customers. And obviously, if their business grows because you've helped with that customer experience, then your business grows as well. So that's the kind of customer that you want. But in this case, it was almost the opposite, because the more the business grew, the more tricky it became for us. So the relationship was such that we couldn't find a way together to pick our way through the situation.
Got you. So the client almost outgrew the relationship, would you say? Or
not the business didn't outgrow. It was the fit was.
Got you.
It no longer was a good fit between the two companies.
Right. Okay. Interesting. And then you mentioned earlier about in-house versus outsourcing. Yeah. What things? Because you mentioned, when it's in-house, they can just do whatever they want and move things about. But like, what those cracks that you can paint over if it is in-house? Like, could you give an example of like what they might be?
So I always imagine, because obviously I used to work for the retailer, so I used to be a fashion buyer, and you mess up. So when I was a buyer's admin assistant a very long time ago, I made some humdingers of mistakes. I forgot to do this, or I forgot to reorder a label when a price was changed, and I would phone up the warehouse and just go, please, and just like, pretty please, and touch my eyelashes as you could in those days when I was a bit younger. And basically I was able to persuade the warehouse to suspend the process and help rescue this poor little buyer's admin assistant from the trauma that she didn't want the merchandiser to shout at her, for example. And those sorts of things happen all the time when you're in-house. So you don't see it, but a little favour here, a little, just get that in the back door there, or sting it in a corner for 5 minutes there. Yeah. All of those things you can manage when it's your in-house operation, especially if it's your building.
Yeah.
So, and when you outsource, obviously that flexibility or disruption, depending on what you want to look at it, has to go by definition, or it has to be charged for, because when you're asking someone to disrupt a process, you're introducing cost into the business. You're maybe asking people to do extra labour, or you're making a productivity go down, which means that the ongoing operation costs more. Yes. And so obviously a 3PL can't allow that to happen, because they've modelled that pricing so carefully based on all the assumptions that have been given to them, that all of those disruptive processes need to be documented, they need to be charged, they create a job sheet. They also can potentially, if you try to say, can you just divert this thing and put this late delivery that was my fault in front of those other 3 deliveries, then that will be raised higher, because you're going to be breaking SLAs, and so the client, the 3PL doesn't want to be seen to fail the SLA by doing a favour. Yeah. So then so you have to have a process for prioritisation, a process for signing off job sheets, and that's all good, because it actually does help warehouses run more smoothly. Yeah. But when you're not used to that, it's very alarming that you suddenly are exposed. The exposure, the cost is exposed, because your FD gets it on an invoice every month when you're doing those little things, which were just all hidden in the ongoing cost, because they were all stable cost. You were paying so much rent and you had so many employees per month. It didn't show to the FD beforehand.
Okay. And I guess then going into the bigger customers, because I know you're massively focused across Europe. I understand there's retailers or companies out there in general that will have a multi-site requirement. Could you share some experience on multi-site 3PL and what that looks all like?
Yeah, that's obviously where I've been operating since I started working in Germany. So now the third company, and Brexit has made that a really important facet. So
yes,
I think in my previous company we had DCs in the UK and the EU, and now of course that's the big thing for me being in the EU. It's a shame because historically we were part of the EU, so you didn't need to have them. However, also a lot of people need to be accessing Asia and the US because obviously it's a big market. Although that's also tricky.
Yeah.
So it's a really difficult decision to know at what point you split your inventory and increase your inventory cost, because you can't just split an inventory into what's going to the EU and what's going to the UK, for example. You're by definition you're going to have a little bit more inventory, which means that your cash is tied up in inventory.
Yes.
And by definition you're going to have more fixed costs because you have to pay some fixed costs for space in two different places.
Got you.
And you may have a little bit more fixed cost in the IT because you're going to have at least two instances of your warehouse management system, for example. On the plus side, of course, you've got you're probably closer to, in terms of time, you're closer to your customer, and you've already done the customs piece, which is really tricky if you've got the inventory bulk into the EU. So when you're picking and packing orders for your for your stores or for your wholesale customers or whoever, all of that work's already been done.
Right.
So obviously it feels like equally balanced what the advantages and disadvantages are between having those two pots of inventories, those two pots of labour, those two bits of space in each country. But if you're really small, or if your business in one side is really small, it's actually better to obviously have one and just cope with the cross-border. And there are some really good services now that can help with customs clearance and really good passport, especially from the UK to the EU.
Yeah.
We're shipping so much, because we're so good at e-commerce, we're shipping so much that lane is very busy and very efficient, therefore. So it really is only a day longer. And in the EU, they're not quite as sensitive still to time as we are here in the UK.
Got you.
So we are next day take up here, and expectation is much, much higher. They are catching up, but they are several years behind us.
Okay.
So there's a point when you've got enough volume that it becomes worth doing, and that is different for everybody. So I think possibly it's going to be a lower point, a tipping point, if you're selling a higher value product.
Got you.
So, I mean, obviously I'm all for it. And I think especially where the market's going with marketplaces and C2C, I think having smaller pots of inventory closer to your customer is going to become more and more important over the coming years. But I definitely have people approaching me now, maybe 2 times a month, where they're looking at splitting their inventory and doing it, and I actually advise them not to.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
What would they expect percentage-wise on cost? Rule of thumb, if you're in this position, and I know there's a lot of variables, but like rule of thumb, you should probably, if you're about to split into multi-site, you probably expect maybe 20% increase, or is there
No, there isn't a rule of thumb, because it really depends on where. So let's stick with the UK-EU situation. If you're going to go into the Netherlands, for example, that's got some advantages on customs and VAT. So you can defer your VAT for quite a while, for example, which gives you a cash flow benefit, which has a value, difficult to quantify, but it has a value. But the Netherlands has low unemployment and a high minimum wage, and the cost to employ somebody is much higher in the Netherlands than it is in the UK.
Yes.
So, and the minimum wage is higher. So your space and labour costs are higher, but you've got some customs and VAT advantages. But if you went to the other side of the EU, so to Czechia or Poland, your space and labour costs are so much better.
Yeah.
So that you'd actually be paying less. So you could be paying more than the UK in Netherlands and less than the UK in Poland. So, but you wouldn't be able to have that deferred VAT situation. So it really is a case by case. And then, of course, you've also got at the moment, famously, everybody's moving their EU logistics to the Netherlands for those reasons, Germany and Poland, because that's, obviously everyone wants to be close to Germany because there's 88 million people there who are shopping online, not quite in the percentages that we are here, but
it's rising.
And also it's a bigger population to start with.
Yeah.
But we've also got a load of people in France, Spain, Italy, Portugal, and that kind of southern Europe that isn't as well served with logistics at the moment. So, so that's I think that's going to be the next big area of focus, is the Iberian Peninsula and France in particular.
Okay. So in terms of, I guess, operational challenges, has there been any instances where there's been challenges that actually turn into opportunities? You've been able to flip the switch?
Yeah, I think a lot of people will tell you that all challenges have the ability to become opportunities. I guess we could go back to Brexit, which presented a load of new services.
Yeah.
But I think probably people have talked about that a lot already. I think perhaps we could look at let's think peak management, for example.
Okay.
So we can use, so peak is challenging every year, especially in consumer products. You can have a factor of your peak to average ratio could be a factor of 10. So your peak order volume could be 10 times your average order volume, which again would be double your low days order volume.
Yes.
That's really difficult to manage. But you could turn that into an opportunity by using the data that you've accumulated historically and working with your customer and working with your systems and processes. So, for example, you could, when you're doing the peak planning, which you should be starting, my team's getting nagged from about February onwards, you take the data from last year and you're like, okay, well, so the challenges here are how to manage the customer experience when the whole infrastructure is stressed, not just your own warehouse, but also your suppliers, inbound and outbound suppliers. So you can take that data and say, well, actually, 90% of your customers didn't order an express delivery. They only ordered a standard delivery. Can we manage extend the window? And can we perhaps promote standard delivery and do something that maybe reduces next day delivery? Because actually peak nowadays is so far in advance of when people really need the product, because it's really Christmas based.
Yeah.
That next day delivery is often, I can't remember the exact statistics, but often it's about customers knowing when it's arriving, or wanting the security of paying for an express delivery because that they know that the supply chain is stressed. So managing your customers, managing your marketing, to try and take the peak looks like this. If you could take the top off the peak and move that into the befores and afters. So working really closely with your clients, and I'm always banging on about how marketing and operations should be best friends because they often aren't.
Yeah.
But also you can use that data to manage that internally. So forget looking out to the client, but manage internally. There's loads of opportunities to automate now, which were historically much more difficult. So you can start off with your quick wins where you can say, well, if we're looking at, there's some downtime. There's actually, even in peak, there's downtime. So on Black Friday, for example, everybody thinks you come into work at 5 a.m. rather than 6 a.m. so you can get cracking on Black Friday volume. But actually the shoppers don't shop until midday. They don't stop until their lunch breaks start, really. So even though all the brands and retailers are releasing their offers, the real volume doesn't hit down until the afternoon.
Yes.
So how can you manage that downtime? How can you find other pockets of downtime to either move the labour out of that downtime into the busy time, or do really valuable preparation work in that time, so building boxes or basically making sure that all your locations are chock-a-block full of products so you don't have to stop to do replenishment or those sorts of things. So there's some internal quick wins. And then there's some really exciting developments in how people are selling automation at the moment.
Got you.
So I'm not a tech or an AI genius. I wish I was, because I would have a different career trajectory there. But what is always been difficult with shared user 3PL, where you've got multiple clients doing multiple products with multiple lengths of contract, is it's been very difficult to, how do I automate a warehouse like that? Because I've got one client that's doing fashion and one client that's doing Christmas trees and one client that's doing beauty and one client's leaving in a year because they've been building their own warehouse and one client's got a 5-year contract. How do you automate that? But you do need to automate these days. And there's loads of different ways to automate. So what's the right one? Because what's right for a Christmas tree is not what's right for a lipstick or a pair of shoes.
Yes.
And historically, that was a really big investment. So it goes back to that ROI. So you'd have to do a huge piece of analytics. You'd have to invest in this automation, which would take you ages to do systems and the infrastructure, the integration, and the horizon for the return on investment would be years. And then what would happen is your client mix would change or the market would change and suddenly lipsticks would be out of fashion and everybody's buying something different. And so the automation you've designed suddenly doesn't work or is inappropriate or you've got the whole problem, which I always laugh about, is that if automation is working, it's 100%. But the second there's a failure, it's 0%. But at least the day after the Christmas party when everyone's got a hangover, at least the people are operating at 90%. So you're getting something out. But these days, it's really exciting to see that people are now, the providers of automation hardware and software are selling it as a service. So you don't have to make that massive big investment. You can dip in, you can dip out. So you can buy a bit of auto store, you can buy a cobot here, a bit of pick by light for that lipstick there, and you can not buy it, you can lease it, and then you can grow it if it's really important because that client's growing, or you can shrink it or give it back if that other client's going, and you can get software. Floxmind, for example, doing software where you just have one person, one tech company that's managing all of that for you.
Got you.
So that's really exciting, and that's a really good way to use your data to turn a massive pain point into an opportunity.
Very, 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 very interesting.
In the end.
It was really good. I did have just a question on that. Has there been any tongue-in-cheek, almost like catastrophes? I feel like when you go into 3PL, it's like there's always some sort of story of something happening.
I have got one. So I've got a few catastrophes about various different areas, but we did implement a cobot. So that's the cooperative robots where they basically bring in the product to the packer. And while that was being mapped in one DC, we called it Marvin because there's a famous robot in probably before your time, but a very depressed robot in a famous TV show. Basically, this cobot decided that it was going to ignore the mapping for some reason and take itself to a dock leveler, which is where the lorries come up, which is like quite a big drop, like a drop. And effectively it tried to commit suicide out of the dock leveler. So we had to rescue the depressed robot and reprogram it so that it.
Amazing. What was it carrying? Do you remember?
It wasn't. Because it was before they'd been deployed in anger.
Okay.
Luckily.
Got you. No, interesting. Yeah.
So suicidal robots.
Bless. R.I.P. I get. And this is just curiosity out of anything, but with Uniserve, because I've come to know the industry is really incestuous. Everyone tends to work with everyone. Even these asset light 3PLs will go and partner with other 3PLs. Let's say if a site isn't performing or isn't full, and just needs an injection and stuff. With you guys being asset heavy, do you partner with other 3PLs?
We do.
And
so first of all, I call it the village rather than incestuous because it sounds a bit nicer. Everybody's got their little village that they operate in. So e-commerce, fashion, logistics, supply chain. I remember doing a talk about 15 years ago to a load of parcel carriers at an event. I was just saying, you guys need to get together and start collaborating because each of you is sending a half-empty lorry to this place, and so you're shipping 3 half-empty lorries. Why don't you put it all together into one full lorry? And that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. And then in my last company, we would have a number of companies who would be both our partner, our supplier, and our competitor. Because, in some places, some lanes, some geographies, we'd be the stronger party, so they'd need to rely on us. In some places, they'd be the stronger party. And then we could go to market in some places together, and then sometimes we'd be bidding against each other.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I think that's, for me, I think that's great. And of course, we do that at Uniserve because we've obviously got all of these different strings to our bow in terms of property, IT, consultancy, warehousing, all different modes of freight and all different geographies. So sometimes we are going to be the right people for someone to come to us to help them out, and it would make commercial sense for both parties. And sometimes we need to go to other people.
Yeah.
We've got gaps in our network. We do need partners, and we are a partner, and we try to be a good partner.
Yeah.
So I really think that's the way to go, because why have 5 different people doing something half well? Why not put all your volume together and get the economies of scale of working together in the cooperation? I think, yeah.
Interesting. And with partnerships, is there almost a like a certain profile, i.e., have you ever turned a partnership down? Because from my understanding, they will come in with their own operation, their own technology, their own WMS, and almost cut the warehouse in half and say, we'll have this bit, you have this bit.
I suspect, in truth, obviously, these opportunities come up. Truthfully, probably we turn down a majority,
right,
but not a huge majority. So I'm talking like 55, 60%. I've just made that number off the top of my head, but that's what I mean by majority.
Yeah.
So there have definitely been cases where people have approached us that initially they don't look like they're competing for the same customers on the same service, because that's the key. If we're bidding on something where we want to own a customer, then that's not a good partner for us if they want to own the same customer. But where a partnership, through no fault of anybody's in particular, where it's been believed that there would be a good partnership, but actually we are competitors, and it would mean that somebody would either have their sales cannibalised, or they wouldn't get the right size piece of the pie to make it commercially viable.
Got you.
So, that is identified most often at the beginning of the discussion, so it doesn't become a problem for everybody and everyone's happy and moves on. But once or twice that's gone a little bit further down the line before it's become apparent that this is actually somebody who thinks that they're helping, but actually they want to take this piece of operation from us as part of their operation. So therefore it then doesn't leave us with enough. So so it's they always have to be considered.
Yeah.
And you do have to, when there is that kind of supplier competitor situation, you do have to be really careful about how you're going to manage your contracts and your pipeline to make sure that you are working together, but you're not either deliberately or accidentally taking advantage of the knowledge you gain from that partnership to service your own business at the expense of your partner's business. Yeah, so, I've got you. So the deals have to be constructed thoughtfully.
I hear you. And I guess with you owning the site, I'm just going into like property mode here, but like, do you hold an advantage because you own the site? Could you kick the tenant out if things weren't upheld, or
no, we couldn't. So there would always be a proper lease in place. So and also we wouldn't, but most importantly we couldn't.
Yeah.
So in terms of warehousing partners, where we would look to work with people is perhaps with this 4PL. So we would be a partner under 4PL who's aggregating volume, mostly e-commerce volume, at a global scale, where perhaps they might have need a DC in Latin America where we're not, but also the EU where we are. So there's going to be a 4PL sitting between us and the client, but we would still operate on our systems. So they'd have to be, and of course they could be, but there would have to be a special case for us not to want to work on our own systems, because that would disrupt our efficiencies and our economies of scale.
Got you. Okay.
But most of these companies now that are doing that kind of fulfillment aggregation, they provide an interface with the client, but they allow the providers to use their own systems, because I think that probably was a blocker historically. Yeah,
I was going to say, and I guess would there be a risk of because you are competing to some degree, would there be a risk of sharing intellectual IP or stuff like that?
That is a risk. I think it's. I mean, so that has to be put into the deal. It has to,
Yeah.
and you have to make sure that the right people, or only the necessary people and the trustworthy people, have access to anything. I mean, it is difficult to still. I mean, warehousing processes, you could call it IP, but I picked that process is going to be very similar across all the warehouses around the world. So the IP really sits around any tech or anything specifically designed for a client or a vertical. And so that's more difficult to steal without it being really obvious who's accessing what have you. But yeah, it has to be really carefully thought about.
No, interesting. And I guess going into the automotive sector, what's Uniserve, what's Uniserve doing within automotive at the minute?
So I'm probably not qualified to answer that.
Okay.
And so historically, I have worked in automotive. And so I know that some of these aftermarket parts systems are very good for e-commerce. But because I've only been with Uniserve since June, my area of expertise is still sitting in the consumer product side. I know that we are good in automotive and we're moving a lot of stuff around. I know that we're also good in pharma and moving a lot of stuff around, but I haven't been fully exposed to it yet, so I can only talk about
the consumer,
beauty, makeup,
the sexier side of the market.
So I do call automotive the dirty side of logistics, but not usually to their faces. So maybe the real side, I don't know.
No, I've got you. I think it goes to show how big 3PL is when you can go down the vertical the vertical route, and so the size of some of these companies. What's the biggest company in the consumer side that you've worked with?
Me personally, probably New Look.
Is it right?
So New Look was a company that I worked with, or we worked with at Amethyst, and actually that same team, a lot of them came to Seco, so that's one of the reasons why I went to Seco. But back in the day, New Look, when I first started that company in 2007, they didn't have they weren't selling online at all. Their only presence was a window.
Right.
And they did a deal where they had a beautiful warehouse up in Newcastle under Lyme, which was doing all their store deliveries, and they recognised that they couldn't do e-commerce because the skills were so different. And in those days, it was a bit more difficult as well.
Yeah.
It's much easier to access because it's much more mature now. So they spent 5 years building a state-of-the-art fulfillment centre next door to their retail distribution centre.
Right.
But they needed a 3PL to take them for those first 5 years because they couldn't wait till they were flying to do it. So they awarded Amethyst the contract. And so Amethyst took New Look together from 0 online sales to, at one point, certainly, being the third biggest online women's wear retailer or retailer. In 5 years. So that was quite a growth, I can imagine. And so that necessitated almost a solution redesign every 6 months, just because it just had to step up and step up and step up and step up. So that was definitely the biggest.
Oh, wow.
I think in those days, it was really interesting that in the UK, all the biggest, with the exception of ASOS, all the biggest online retailers were actually high street multiples. So when the consumer first started shopping online at scale, they were shopping from trusted brands like Marks and Spencer and Next and what have you. And it's only latterly that market's become much more fragmented, and then obviously the marketplaces have come in as well. So
I guess you've got things like social media as well, right? Like TikTok Shop,
much more niche stuff. Yeah. A lot of the growth in C2C with Vinted, and obviously eBay is always there, but Vinted and Depop, Vinted in particular, is really market changing.
So, in terms of, I guess, then the future of fulfillment, what does that look like? What should people expect to see?
So, automation. So, as we discussed, a lot more flexibility, automation sold as a service, so that not only can large-scale in-house operations use it, but it's now accessible to much smaller companies, whether they're in-house, but also much more easy for shared user sites to implement it. That's all different types of automation. I think the availability and the cost of labour is going to drive that. We also see that one of the reasons that China is doing so well logistically is because in this country or Western countries generally, we've tended to look at the really expensive, complicated, like car factory production lines for automation. But China has looked to automate the basic cheap processes, just get the people out. So they're automating the volume, the e-commerce pick and pack. And so I think the more of that's going to come here. So automation, I think smaller operations. Or so in 3PL, it wouldn't necessarily mean smaller sites, smaller facilities, but many more clients, maybe not many more, but more clients and smaller clients. And I think that's going to be driven by a couple of things. So first of all is the international landscape is becoming more complicated because of various factors, Brexit and what's going on in America at the moment. Which means that customs borders are becoming more and more tricky, which means if you want to keep your global market share, you do need to have more people will need to have their inventory in country. And to keep that flexibility, that's forward stock holding locations, if you like. So stock holding locations closer to your customer, which will be smaller. So you're kind of fragmenting. So rather than having one massive, super duper efficient mega hub, you're going to have to split it into 4 medium-sized mega hubs and lose some of those economies of scale back to automation in different countries. And then even further down that line, I think this growth in consumer to consumer. Obviously, consumers don't necessarily need warehouses because I sell stuff on Vinted, and I'm selling maybe 2 items a month, so I don't need to store that. But there's going to be some smaller sellers that are going to make businesses on that, so that they might need some warehousing when they grow. There's also going to be a growth in the demand for authenticating. Or maybe consolidating and shipping to get across into certain geography. So you might, I don't know if you wanted to go to, I'm making this up, so I don't know anything about Azerbaijan, but if you wanted to go to Azerbaijan, for example, rather than shipping 50 parcels, it might be better to have a consolidation hub somewhere in Europe and then just ships once a day to Azerbaijan.
Got you.
So you've got authentication, but also returns. So returns processing hubs close to where the consumers are, so that C2C can bring returns back and then get them back to their original seller. That makes sense. So I think C2C is really changing that that scale, and it also, of course, all of those things that are driving the smaller warehouses are also going to be driving volume away from the big retailers.
Right.
So the big retailers are probably going to struggle to maintain their size, let alone grow, with the international challenges and with the growth in consumer to consumer. So smaller, more warehouses, smaller operations. Yeah,
it makes sense, because I guess when you divide the super hub into 4, it probably just makes it more appeasing for the cost effective for the person having to live up to these economies of scale. Makes the split maybe.
I think it makes it
a bit easier.
It makes this. I think probably what will happen is we'll try and keep the economies of scale or keep the efficiency through using automation.
Yes.
Whilst making the operation smaller, but most importantly for C2C, the hub will be closer to the first C and the second C, so the seller and the customer.
Right.
That's about proximity. So that's why it's going to be more localised.
And do you think you could do any mystic predictions of like, hey, I think this is going to happen either retailer or 3PL?
I think so. I think this whole stuff with Shein and Temu is going to be the biggest change, and I think that they are going to come over here with those automations and the processes and the systems that they've been using in China to get all of those cheap labour-intensive orders out where we haven't automated, but they have, and they are opening warehouses over here for their own stuff. And that's going to make them even more dangerous competitors to the established retailers and brands over here. So you've got, at volume, you've got Shein and Temu eating away at that end, and then you've also got consumer to consumer eating away at the other end, and that's and then you've got regulatory situations all over the place, which is also eating away. So it's going to be a very challenging environment for the more mature brands and retailers.
Interesting.
In the coming years,
Interesting.
And 3PLs. Because we've got to change our business model if we're going to either service these new markets or compete with them. All of us. So
Interesting. Well, yeah, I'll be keeping an eye out. See,
we should reconvene in 2 years to see how right I was.
Yeah, how many sites they've got over here and what's going on. But no, look, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
It's been really good just to get into it. And I'd love to be able to get onto site as well. And
I'd love to work with you too.
I know we sort of shared like we're better walking and talking rather than sat in a studio, but like it'd be good to, actually put some of this stuff to life that we've spoke about, automation and stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully the marketing team are watching, listening.
Yeah, I'll remind them. I'll send this to them. So definitely come to the site that we've talked about showing you.
Yeah.
It has more than just the consumer products. We also have the largest single chamber fridge, I think, in the world. Certainly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so we can show you a fridge and a freezer.
That's for healthcare, is it?
No. Do you ever go to McDonald's and get chicken nuggets?
My kids do.
They came through that fridge.
Right.
There you go.
Oh, wow.
So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I love that. If you're a warehouse boy.
Right. Well, thank you for coming on,
pleasure.
Claire. And I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.